Well, welcome everybody to Destiny Disrupted. My name's Naomi Evans and I'm really proud to introduce you today to Nur Shkembi, the guest curator of Destiny Disrupted, which opened her call today. Before we continue, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we're meeting on, and especially in the context of Queensland College of Art, reflecting this is a site of teaching and learning for millennia. Nur Shkembi is joining us from Melbourne, where she has an extensive practice over 2 decades as a writer and scholar, and apart from delivering over 150 projects, most recently Soul Fury at Bendigo Art Gallery, which was won a National Award in 2022. She worked with community, exhibition making, and has profoundly contributed to the cultural landscape of Australia and Melbourne, where she set up the Islamic Art Museum as one of the core team members and inaugural artistic director and curator, and also profoundly contributed to the inaugural nationwide survey of Australian Muslim artists from 2009 for You and I. And with that, we're delighted to join me in welcoming Nur, who's going to give us some insights to Destiny Disrupted. Thank you.
And thank you to Griffith University Art Museum for this very kind invitation and opportunity to speak, and of course to the team, to Angela and Naomi and Dan and all the team and a wonderful team of installers, and everybody that's been part of putting together this exhibition. It's been a great honour to work with you, and the installation has been done with so much care, and it's absolutely stunning in the space. I'm very proud to speak here today. I too would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land where we're meeting here today, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. And I extend that acknowledgement to any First Nations people who are joining us here today. So if you'd like to kind of move into the space, there is a little bit of background noise going on with the videos that are playing, but this is all part of the experience. And as you can see, house lights are down and the works are spotlit again, just be mindful of where you're walking. So the exhibition Destiny Disrupted has come about through many years of research in my PhD, although it's not directly related to my thesis research, which is in contemporary Islamic art. The ideas of alternative narratives or histories that are less known is certainly part of that research. And each of the 11 artists that you've seen here today, in their own way, disrupt history. And they are doing that through many different ways. For example, through recalling history, through archiving the present moment. So artists, there is a lot of layers to their practice. And I'm hoping that you'll be able to, after this talk today, spend some time with the artworks. So just here to my left, we have 3 works here by Philip George, and it's from the Drawing in Water series. So Phil concerns himself with the contact zones between Australia and what we refer to as the Middle East, but I would say West Asia, Asia Minor, and his long-term interest has been in empires, and in particular drawing in water. You can see here there's like these little tiny icons or iconographies from past empires, and the word icon refers to what's made like with your hands, and the reference here is about the way in which, empires can be built and then disappear. And, it's almost like drawing in water. So you can see a trace for a moment, and then it's almost like it's gone. It's also about the destruction that occurs. So when something is built, it overtakes. Normally, the natural landscape will overtake the people that are there. So it's also about that loss. And there's actually it's worthwhile looking through the material that's been supplied in the reception area in the reading room, and seeing the football work there, because they're absolutely really beautiful and powerful pieces. So in conversation with these works, we have Ilyas Alavi's incredible neon sign here, Doesn't It Taste of Blood? And this is one line from a poem, one of Ilyas's poems. So Ilyas is an Afghan Hazara who lived for a long time in Iran, so he was displaced living in Iran, where he's a well-known poet. So this poem actually reads, as you draw water from a well and make tea with that water, doesn't it taste of blood? So he was alerted to his poem, this line in particular, being spray painted on a wall in Iran, and then he saw a photograph of it. So it was used as a rallying cry for young people protesting against the Iranian government. So this neon sign is actually a derivative, or it's an image taken off that wall. It's been installed in a wave to appear as though it's a graffiti on a wall. But again, here we can see the medium of material that's being used, the fragility of neon. And then, this idea of the impermanence of, spray painting on the wall. And there's a tension between the two, but also something that's, very impermanent. So in this space as well, we have Shireen Tawil's works, two beautiful hand-pierced copper works called Devices for Seeing. And Shireen's practice is based primarily in copper. So she travelled to Gaziantep in Turkey and undertook a residency there for over 3 months, and learned from traditional makers. And she's been honing the skill over a number of years. And what's really interesting is, traditionally it's not really, women don't do coppersmithing or blacksmithing. It's usually a male-gendered occupation. But Shireen is flipping that, so she's taking ownership of that. It references her Islamic heritage and the traditions of copper smithing, but she's speaking to really contemporary issues. So she's speaking about the past, so ideas of migration, and in particular with this work, it's the notions of a celestial device for seeing the future. So what would the future of migration look like? And in particular, who is going to occupy space? What will migration look like in space? So we know what it looks like here, and the complexities of that, and why migration happens. So she's really concerned about, when we do finally enter space, what will happen there? Just to my left here, we have a beautiful, mesmerising video by the late Musuem and his son Musuem. Hussein sadly passed away at the beginning of this year. And he was a incredibly important artist here in Australia. He originally migrated from Iran in the 1970s, and this work in particular was made during the very long lockdown we had in Melbourne over 18 months. This is a collaboration with his son Musuem, so it was the fourth and final collaboration between father and son. And again, it references Hussein's interest in Sufism and this ideal notion of rotation. And, looking at the metaphysical and the sublime. And so there's a deliberate sort of slowness and meditation in the work, and it's worth sort of taking the time to sit with this piece and to watch it through. And again, there are amazing works that Hussein has in his practice that reference the divine, that reference Sufism and the dervish and the swirling, and this idea also of everything is circular. Atoms spin, everything spins, and this idea of being one with the physical and metaphysical, and this idea of turning. So these are all really sort of important elements to Hussein's practice. Musuem, this beautiful way that he's captured this spinning sort of, these branches that have been, haphazardly put together by Hussein. And also, the sound that's in the video as well. So, there's this sort of grinding sound that gives you a sense of, this movement being circular, and also there's a little bit of a sitar, like traditional Iranian musical instrument that you can hear in the sound as well. So, you can find little clues, and there's little, a nod to both their heritage. So this incredible poem by Omar J. Saka, who won the Prime Minister's Literary Awards in 2020. And I'll just read this to you. So it starts, so the first line is also the title. Do not rush to make a judgment. You can savage a body at speed. A city can be ruined in an hour. A love of decades dashed in a second. It takes 9 months to start a life. It should take as long to end one. After a trigger is pulled and before a bullet lands, give 9 months to the target to welcome the whole, to accept the blood and the blunt lead, the new body. I know it is possible to allow a death to gestate. Watch time mushroom out from a bomber and seasons unfurl on the city below. Spring in Baghdad to winter in Aleppo, one final semester of learning, a retreat by a river. Time enough to be thankful for old books and DVDs borrowed, to study the bullet or the blast with the lover's eye. It seems a short goodbye, but last year alone, America dropped 26,171 bombs on brown bodies, on our trees and animals and homes. That's 235,539 months, or 19,628 years to process the devastation of one. Honestly, I am unsure of the maths. Give or take a week, millenniums are still owed to the lost. I don't know how to calculate for the land or the numbers, for the unlucky survivors, the dust-strewn rubble reapers looking for family in red rocks, for burned paper that might hold a shred of a name, for safe waters that will not drown them, for borders that will not cut their feet or demand they unstitch history from their backs. Call it an ugly flag, plant a new one in their mouths. This kind of loss has not been measured. It has no body count. But we have all the time in the world to weigh it now. We have all the time in the world. So there's an asterisk here against this number because obviously that number has changed. These stats were taken in 2017, and Omar says here, I was referring to statistics from 2016, looking back. In 2017, America dropped a record 60,000 bombs. From 2001 to 2020, over 325,981 bombs.
The current amount is unknown, since former President Trump put a stop to the numbers being published. In my lifetime alone, the sheer tonnage of destruction and chaos that has been unleashed on majority Muslim and Arab nations has been nothing short of catastrophic. Year after year of staggering violence, which the population of Western countries seem to accept. So it's a deeply, profoundly moving poem, and it's almost like through his poem, Omar is warping or bending time or making us slow down and think about the individual person, because the numbers are too great, are too big to conceive. And it makes it easy just to dehumanize or disconnect from that, because we can't fathom that number. So this is about slowing down and actually thinking and contemplating. And as we walk through into this space, we can see there's a sculpture here, video work, photograph and tapestries. So in thinking about this space here, we're looking at the flesh and the body as a way of sharing narrative. So the human form and figure. To my right here is a work by Abdurrahman Abdullah. It's a sculpture. It's called Mask after Ned Kelly, and it's an actual replica. So Abdurrahman's carved the death mask of Ned Kelly. And what this work is speaking to is the way in which we lionize or, make heroes of criminals and that criminality, and how that in turn makes it easier to other people. So, there's a history in this country that hasn't properly been dealt with in terms of colonisation. And then beyond colonisation, the way in which we glorify the violence of men, and how that continually affects people of colour, migrant communities, and of course First Nations people in the present day. So in proximity to this work, it's almost like Ned Kelly here was witnessing Agonistes, which is Hura Afshar's video. And in this video, you can see there's a very tight kind of like filming, like close-up of body parts. So these were interviews undertaken with a group of whistleblowers who have bravely come forward to speak their truth and to talk about things that they've witnessed in their jobs, things that they've witnessed in, mainly immigration detention, the Afghan war. So there are various people in this video who are currently facing trial. So it's about, this idea of the hero and of speaking up, but the immense cost of doing that. And most of these heroic people speak of their trauma now, and the pressure that they're under, the psychological issues that they've developed, the loss of their families, the loss of their jobs, and the loss of so much. And despite this loss, this great loss, every single person that would interviewed said that they would do it again. So knowing what they know about the cost of this, that they would do it again, and it speaks to their great integrity. And again, Hura Afshar, as a documentary photographer and filmmaker, her practice involves staged documentary, but also here we can see, this is very much a hyper-focused work on the whistleblowers and the conversations that they had with Buddha, which were recorded with multiple cameras in the space. And the idea is you can literally see their skin trembling, you can see their skin crawling. You can see, how nervous they are and how much anxiety they have. And it really humanises this. Again, it kind of lands us in reality about really what a hero looks like. And it's kind of an antithesis of Derek Mann's work, Australian people as a nation have, turned Ned Kelly into a hero, and actually what we see here in Buddha's work are the real heroes. Also in the space we have two works by Abdullah. So to my left here we have Single Histories 1 and 2. So Abdul is in the portrait here and he's wearing a mask from the Planet of the Apes movie, so it's an actual movie prop. And these two photographs belong to a series of works called Coming to Terms. And it's about the projecting how people see him, so the monstrosity being projected back to the viewer. But in this actual photograph, he is coming to terms with that. So he's embracing that self-image. And to my right here, again, we've got, this, very sort of awkward imagery. There's two tapestries here, put together 1 and together 2. And they're actually speaking to the need of and the joy of human connection. So in the other works here, we can see there's disconnects that happen between people, but then also that desire for connection. And these works are quite special. So these tapestry works were made in Indonesia. DGTMB Studios, which was started by the artist Eko Nugroho. And this is a method of tapestry called, it's hand machining. And it was something that was very sort of prevalent in Indonesia, and then the practice stopped and the skill was being lost. So Eko bankrolled basically the studio to have artisans come in, and artists started collaborating with the studio to give these makers work. And now, there's many wonderful contemporary artworks that we see coming through the studio. So again, this was about collaboration for Abdul as well. And so we'll just move through to the third gallery space. So just here to my left, you can see these 4 beautiful light boxes, illustrations by Safdar Ahmed. Safdar Ahmed was recently representing Australia at Document 15, and he is one of the founding co-founders of the Refugee Art Project that operates in Ontario country in Sydney. And for many years, Safdar has been working closely with refugees in Villawood Detention Centre, and also once the refugees have been released, keeping that sense of community around their practice. And this one in particular, called Going Deep, a series of portraits of some of the refugee artists that collaborate and come together at the Refugee Art Project. And their conversations in particular with Sufism, and as a way of dealing with trauma and separating themselves from that trauma, many of the artists like to kind of set aside those conversations and almost I mean, compartmentalising is a bit of a hard word, but for many people surviving trauma, to be able to see moments of joy, they really need to separate that out. So this is a series of portraits where, you know, these refugee artists are having conversations, and one of them is to say, or call it, we're going deep, meaning they're talking about deeply spiritual matters and finding joy in that, as opposed to, you know, always having to talk about their trauma or talking about what had happened to them or how they're feeling. So it's a moment of release and peace. And we also have some hand-drawn works here by Safdar, called Yanabi. So again, there's a spiritual reference here. Yanabi means O prophet. But this is also part of Safdar's practice, so he's sort of localising Islamic calligraphy here. And it has like a bit of an edgy Zion-making feel to it, which is part of Safdar's practice. So again, there's a real sort of strong spiritual element here, and the separation from trauma. And this speaks to Khaled Sabsabi's work, 99, which you can see here to the left. So this incredibly beautiful video work. The images that are going on in the background behind the whirling dervish in the white gown that you see in the foreground are a collection of images from Khaled's archives, and they reference war and destruction, and in the front you can see the Sufis as well. So that dervish was filmed by Khaled in the mountains of Yemen in a private Sufi ceremony, and he's been given permission to share that image. And again, it's like all this sort of horror going on in the world, and here's this dervish, he's able to separate himself from that and center himself in his spirituality. It's just, you know, a incredibly powerful and beautiful work that is deeply healing, but also quite painful when you think about what the dervish is separating himself from. And just on this large low-line thing here, we have 99 framed images, and these are again images of all, but Khaled, as a way of dealing with that, has handwritten, hand-painted over each of the images, and you can see sort of remnants of Arabic text and calligraphy. And this is, you know, I guess an enigmatic part of the work. We don't quite know what it says or the meaning behind it, but we are very well aware of the order and process that he's gone through to make it, and that's one of the important aspects of the work. Also, just behind you on the wall, a list of the 99 names of God, and Khaled has that shown as part of the work. And the idea is that there's 99 names, the 98 portraits here on the floor, and then the video was 99, and we don't yet know what number 100 is. And again, the names of Allah and God always start with mercy. So in Islam, when you begin your prayers, you say Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So it's in the name of God, most gracious, most merciful. So it always begins with mercy, and that's you know, a big part of this work as well is that peacefulness and that idea of mercy. And you know, in conversation with Safdar's works, you can see this idea of seeking that peacefulness and that need to seek that, and how, you know, living with trauma can be quite a difficult thing, and we can't quite understand unless we've lived through some of the things that these people have lived through, just how profound that need for the separation is. So yeah, there's a lot of also peace in these works. Does anybody have any questions? Any comment, or even any comments?
Nur, you have been involved with a collective called the 11 Collective, maybe, and many of these artists have also been involved. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that, that grouping and the energy behind, this collective group.
Sure. So I'm part of a collective called 11, which was initiated by Khaled Sabsabi back in 2016, and we came together formally in 2017. And the idea was to amplify the voice of Australian Muslim artists. It was about a self-determined platform and being able to engage in projects together where we could really sort of support one another in the conversations that we're having with our artworks, within ourselves, within our communities. And it's important that there's autonomy in the platforms that you have. Even, for example, there are a number of artists in this show that are from the 11 Collective, and being able to work here at Griffith University Art Museum, and just the generosity and ability to do this in an autonomous way has been really important. So it's about also finding platforms where the work of the artist can speak freely and not be compromised, or, like, more importantly, not be curated or seen out of context, because oftentimes works can be placed in a way that drains the meaning, or in some cases, some of the artists have found that their work has been placed in a way that it becomes decorative instead of holding deep meaning that they are portraying in the work. So again, it's about having that control back. For Khaled, he was inspired by Proper Now, the First Nations collective, and had conversations with some of the collective artists, and there's lots of connections between 11 and the artists in Proper Now as well. And I'm not saying that we're in a different situation, we're also settlers and here is migrants, but again, it's about speaking from the margins and really making the difference. So for exhibitions like this in particular, when artists from minority communities are curated into group exhibitions or placed in a broader context, for example, in a museum or gallery, sometimes the power of what they are saying can get lost, because they are one amongst many, because the majority or the dominant voice is heard over and above the lone person who's speaking about a particular issue, about migration or identity or a version of history that is seen from a different angle that's not necessarily the official history that we are taught in schools, or the way museums and galleries collect art and tell that social history through art collecting. There's always these gaps that we miss. So in bringing together artists that are speaking to history from the margins, it really amplifies that. And that's why shows like this is, are really important. And it's why 11 Collective have come together. So it's just about the amplification and ensuring that it's not like a lost solo voice in amongst a broader conversation that's not hearing you. Any other questions? Even comments?
I'm interested in the role, or well, the prominence of text and poetry within the show. Would Omar consider themselves to be a contemporary artist? And, is this a new context for their work? Or, I wonder whether you could speak to, there's a long history in terms of text and script, within an Islamic context, but I'm interested in how you're bringing contemporary poetry and graffiti, all those other, which we also see here with Safdar's work. So could you speak to that?
Yeah, great question. And absolutely, for me as a curator, that idea of bringing text into a contemporary art exhibition is really important. I'm not the only one who does it, and it's certainly not always just done in an Islamic context. We know this is, practiced across many, cultures and in many countries. With Omar's text, I'm not sure, I can't answer for him, but I'm pretty sure it hasn't been shown this way in an exhibition before. So it's just a matter of asking, right? Like, if there's a poet or writer that you want to show in your exhibition, the worst thing they're going to do is say no. So you just ask. And I was very fortunate that Omar agreed to have his incredible poem, Do Not Rush, show as part of Destiny Disrupted. And, in many ways, the work and the writing, a lot of Omar's poetry really resonates with the work of the visual artists. So there's a great synergy there, and there's a great respect between all the artists. And in bringing their work together, there's always this camaraderie. And so for Omar, he was really pleased to be showing with artists that he loves and he follows, and likewise for the artists to have Omar's work in the space. So yeah, it's just about the title. Yeah. Okay. So the title was inspired by a book by Afghan American historian named Tamim Ansari, and it's basically Destiny Disrupted, and it's part of the impetus for my thesis. So this idea of alternate histories or parallel histories. And it was really, it's this idea of the West, the so-called West and East, this sort of binary that goes on, has recorded history in one way and the East in another. And it's really about what happens when these two supposed opposites finally see one another, and these histories collide. So it is kind of, I guess, a historical or poetic grounding for my PhD research in contemporary Islamic art, and that's sort of that idea, that sort of poetic in the alternate histories is what is also kind of woven through this exhibition. There's a subtlety, there's aesthetic connections between the works, but also narratives that connect and loop in between each other and through each other's works, through each of the artists' works. So yeah, I was really sort of fascinated with this idea of histories on the margins, histories that are alternate, and then also when you flip that and what that looks like.
Well, perhaps, I'd just like to thank you so much, Nur, for bringing this incredible show to the Art Museum. We really look forward to the suite of public programs that we're holding in the new year, and to welcoming you back to Brisbane for those and other activities. And I think I'd like to ask us all to join in our thanks, expressing our thanks to Nur. Thank you.